In this video, I'm going to show you a set of BMW turbos that I did a rebuild for from the N54 engine. So to give you an idea, these turbos, well, one of them is still blowing oil, but the other one is not blowing oil. Though the customer told me that both were blowing oil, but at first he told me only one was blowing oil. Then he changed it to both were blowing oil. Because only one of the turbos is blowing oil, I can narrow down the diagnosis to that one of the turbos is not draining the oil out of the cartridge. Now, the reason why it's not draining it out of the cartridge, I can only make guesses, but I can give you a good idea why it's not draining out of the cartridge. The first thing that I would check to see is if there's some kind of paper towel or something in the oil drain that the mechanic may have put there to make sure nothing gets in there. So in this case, if oil was going into the turbos and had a paper towel in the oil drain, then the oil would have nowhere else to leave but the seals, even if the seals were still good. Now, most people don't really take in consideration that if a turbo is leaking oil, that sometimes the turbo is still good, especially if it doesn't have any shaft play and doesn't show any signs of wear and it appears to work perfectly. After I looked closer at the turbos, I noticed that the mechanic didn't take all of the tape off of the oil drain where I had taped it up to seal it so that no debris gets in the turbo that could seriously damage it. Now, if the mechanic had never taken any of the tape off or left part of it on there where it was covering up the drain, then oil would not be able to drain properly to the drain fitting to the oil pan. This could block all the oil trying to drain out of the turbo, and it will just force it to go out the seals. The next thing that I wanted to point out was this turbo was originally in a car accident and that crushed the center cartridge into the compressor housing, damaging it severely. So I did have to replace the bearing housing. However, I didn't replace the compressor housing because it was still in decent shape. So it was still usable despite it did have some external damage. Based on the car accident that happened with the turbo involved, I would have to guess that the oil drain was severely damaged in this accident. If the oil drain was damaged in this accident, then it's likely that it's crushed and will not be able to properly drain the oil out of the cartridge to the oil pan. This will cause the turbo to blow oil just like you see in this video. If any of the things stated before does not appear to be the problem, the next thing that I would check and do would be check the oil drain fitting. They are not really designed that well, as in they have really sharp angles and they also have a seat in there. I would definitely port match that out so that it flows a little better. And then the next thing I would do is check to make sure you don't have a problem with the one-way check valve from the crankcase to the intake manifold. Now, if you have a problem with that, what you'll notice is that your boost air pressure designed to go into the engine is going directly into the crankcase. When that happens, the turbochargers will press air into the crankcase and force the oil back up the drains and out the seals of the turbochargers. All of the diagnoses that I mentioned here does not require you to remove the turbochargers from the car. I would not recommend removing the turbochargers from the car unless you know exactly that there is a problem with the turbos and they were not rebuilt before. Chances are if your turbocharger looks like this, then it probably needs a rebuild. This would be pretty obvious to the eye, and if you can't see that, then you probably need to get some glasses. In order for you to check the one-way valve and the crankcase ventilation, you need to use a boost leak tester. So watch my video on Chevy Cruze boost leak test in order to know how to use a boost leak tester and what to look for. If you checked over all the steps that I just mentioned in this video, the next thing that I would do is make sure that your oil weight is thick enough. I know that it says from the factory to use 5-weight oil on a lot of newer vehicles. However, for turbochargers back in the 90s up to the early 2000s, 10W30 was the standard, at minimum. The reason why is because if your oil weight was too thin, then it would pass the seals. If your oil weight is thick enough and you've tried everything that you could possibly think of, the last thing that I would use is a compression tester. Make sure that your compression is good. A lot of the times with turbo cars, people that decide that they want to boost them hard, they can bust the ring lands in the pistons. When that happens, oil can pass the pistons and go into the combustion chamber and out the cylinder head and into the turbochargers and out to the exhaust. A lot of times this happens when they misdiagnose the turbocharger and the engine's the problem. And then if it's not the piston ring lands, then the last thing that I would think that it would be the valve seals in the cylinder head. Now, with the car that these turbos came off of, it could really be anything because this guy bought this car at an auction with a salvage title. So you never know what to expect, and when you buy a car like that that's not running, you can expect a lot of surprises. If you have checked everything that I mentioned in this video, you could bring it by so I can take a look at it for you and give you some pointers of what to check for. However, I went over the whole checklist of everything that I would look for, and I've been working on vehicles since I was a teenager, since 15, so I have 11 years experience in this field. I will likely be purchasing a BMW with the N54 engine so I can do further videos on this to help you guys as you're working on your own cars. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see more videos like this one, you can always suggest other videos that you would like to see.